Hey, I'm JD. Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe. Please hit like. Today we're going to be doing the reassembly of a Vostok Russian watch. So this is an old watch I had that I disassembled in a previous video, and it was fairly complex. It's just different, I think, to put together and take apart and put together and stuff. So what I did to reassemble it is I just took my old assembly video and I put it in my processing software and reversed it, and then I played it in reverse to just make sure I knew where everything was going. And I also had, as you can see in the right hand side, I have my iPhone with pictures that I had taken from before. So that helped me in the assembly process for this watch. It's a different kind of watch. It's got an interesting button on the side, and that button actually snaps the date. So if it's like the first, you press the button, it becomes the second. You can hear it snap. So it had some interesting springs in it as well that I needed to make sure that these things all went in the right place. Plus the automatic, it's an automatic movement, so it's got a rotor. So, look at me searching all over the place here for stuff, eh? Funny. So anyway, I had to make sure that the whole rotor automatic winding mechanism went back together. When I first did it, I had one double gear that addresses that, and I put it in backwards, and so that didn't work, so I had to reassemble it and put it in the right way. The other problem I ended up having with this particular watch was the regulator pins on here. So it has a regulator arm, not unlike a pocket watch. In a watch, you just have an arm, and usually have an arm for a beat error, where it'll rotate the whole movement to align the impulse jewel properly so that you get zero beat error. Well, this does not have that. It's a tank kind of thing. This is a pretty tough watch. Here I'm just putting together the basics. The center wheel had to go in another wheel as well at the time to get this on. And also the mainspring here, the cap, I ended up taking the mainspring out and cleaning the barrel. And I wound the mainspring in by hand. So I did it by hand because I felt it was a little bit safer to do that using a mainspring winder in this particular case. So I did that. The center wheel is for the seconds hand. It goes right through the center of the watch. There we go. And I figured out, how does this bridge go on? So this video has obviously been sped up considerably, so as to not bore the heck out of you as I reassemble this particular bridge. And this part of the assembly wasn't too difficult. I did find that everything was cleaned up nicely except for a few parts that I had to attack with a bit of Rodico, where the cleaning machine just didn't get to them for some reason. Here, and I'm just poking away to try to make sure that the pivots get through the jewel holes properly. And when you put a watch together like this, you really have to make sure you don't screw the plates down hard until you're absolutely 110% positive that those jewel holes are in the right place. In this watch here, I was putting in the balance prior to, I had to put the balance in because the balance itself would be covered later on, and I wouldn't be able to deal with it. So here I'm putting the balance in. It was good. I ended up cleaning the balance jewel, the upper jewel and lower jewel later on. I don't think I have got that in the video. And here what I was doing is putting a little bit of pressure on the mainspring to see if the pressure on the mainspring barrel would turn the other gears, effectively testing the watch to make sure it's working. So that did work, although, like I said, I had a problem because the regulator arm or pins, one of them was broken. I didn't know it, and so that was causing the watch to stop. That would have to be replaced in the future. I'll have to drill a hole and perhaps make a regulator pin for this watch, because it requires one and doesn't have a good one because it's broken on one side. It's broken on the inside, the part that's facing inward to the watch here. So here I'm oiling various parts of the watch as I assemble the pieces. So it's critical to oil these old watches as you put them back together, because most of the time, this one here probably had never been cleaned ever. These old Russian watches were made by Vostok for the Russian Army, and they basically issued the watch to the Russian soldiers, and this was probably circa 1950-ish for this watch, maybe 1960. That's sort of that era, and you could tell by the watch as well. So they'd issue these watches, and there's no way the Russian soldiers would go and clean these watches, or anybody would clean the watch. So they just wear it, and eventually it would end up somewhere, and then eventually it ended up in my hands, where I bought it from, I think, Etsy or one of those places, because it's a pretty old watch. So, and it's the same one. If you look at my other videos, you'll see the disassembly of this watch in slower speed. So I'm actually, you can see a little bit more of its makeup in the disassembly here. So we're just going to keep blabbing away as I reassemble this watch. I found it to be not frustrating, but a little awkward, the way that the winding mechanisms and those things worked. They weren't like a Seiko or anything. They're just off. It's nothing I was used to. So I had to get used to figure out where those springs went, which was the hardest part, where they leaned and where they would secure themselves. That was the very hard part. And even looking at my old video running backwards, I didn't have close-ups enough to enable me to determine some of the springs where they would sit against some of the peg holes. So I did end up putting it together nicely, and then the winding and setting mechanisms in the watch work nicely. And as I'm overdubbing this video right now, I'm actually wearing the watch on a NATO strap right now, and it's keeping fairly decent time. So for an old watch, right? Yeah, maybe running a little bit fast, but I don't intend to wear this watch, so I've got way too many other watches to worry about. And here I'm using the Myers movement holder number 58. It says it'll hold all watches regardless of their size, shape, or form. Amazing. Your third hand, they call it. So anyway, I had to put a smaller insert into this than the one I normally use for pocket watches. So this little gear just sort of sat on top, which is interesting. And then you put a screw in there to hold it down. And I think that's the gear that changes the day on the date rather on the inside. It's like a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So the day, yeah, on the inside. So this went together fairly well, although I did make a few little minor errors in where the springs kind of went, and I was able to correct those and make it work perfectly later. So, but I put everything in together, including reinstalling the cannon pinion, and the cool thing about this was the button on the side that you press to change the actual day, right? And in fact, I think that's a more important feature than the feature of changing whether it's Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, because I think most of us humans know what day it is, and then we are always asking what the date is. So a lot of watches actually don't have the day on them; they just have the date. They're assuming that if you're a human and you've got half a brain, you'll know what day of the week it is, or just ask somebody, "Hey, buddy, is it Monday or what?" So here I'm putting together the plate. These plates are always very thin, and they always have very small screws to put them on. And for this particular plate, when I go to put the next plate on, I have to actually, there's a hole in there that allows you to move a pawl, like an arm. You can see that little hole that I'm sticking the tweezers in. You have to move that to a certain position, right, to allow you to flip that little pawl gear out of the way, because it's pressing against the gear on the inside of that day wheel, right? So I did this and did it all nicely, and I didn't have the spring in the right position. I actually had to take that apart later on and fix that part, because it wasn't working properly. The spring was not properly secured on one end. It looked like a kind of a U spring, and the U spring wasn't secured properly. Here there's only two legs holding this plate together, and the plate is actually I think a steel plate, so it's a tough old watch. So steel plate there, I was able to change the day. You see that all worked perfectly, no problem. Put that back, and the big thing for me was to get the winding mechanisms back in place and wind the watch and see if I could get the balance turning. And then, matter of fact, I could get it turning by hand, but it was stopping, and the real reason it was stopping was because the regulator pins were way too close to where the stud was. First of all, I looked down and there was two pieces of the hairspring that were stuck together because there was no separation between the stud and the regulator pins. So when I moved that out later on, see, I got a ticking right there, but it stops. And I thought maybe it was power coming from the mainspring, but it wasn't. It was actually the darn hairspring. And it's normally, I'll say at least 50% of the time, there I just demagnetized it. It's the hairspring. So here I'm putting the hands back on the watch. This went fairly smooth. I think that the hour hand went on very well, no problem at all. So I set that hour hand, lined it up, and I put the minute hand. The thing popped off on me the first time. It was a bit of a pain because I thought it was supposed to go on a little bit more than it did, but it really wasn't. So it went on there, no problem. And I pushed it on a little further. And so there I had it working, no problem. There's the watch working nicely. If you do the math, you can see how there, put the movement in the case, and then really you needed to press that button to get that hand, or to get the stem inside the watch properly. And I wound it up and got it running, but it stopped on me again. And later on, like I said, I realized the problem was the hairspring sticking together at the second last coil, I think, simply due to the where the regulator arm was, and that regulator arm having kind of a broken pin on one side. It's kind of an ugly looking regulator on this thing. It's one chunk of metal, and this pin I think was supposed to go straight down, and it's missing. So that's why. So I was able to separate it a bit, but by doing that and getting it to run properly, it's running a bit fast. But I'm not really concerned. Like I said, I'm not going to sell this watch, or I'm not going to be using it. It's going to stick in a drawer for the grandchildren to look at years later, when I can show them what a real Russian watch looks like. There you go. So I have a couple of Vostok watches. They're actually very good watches. I have the Vostok Reef that they made before the war broke out, and basically they made it look like a normal, like a North American or Swiss watch. The case back was not their crazy case back with the ring on it. It was a normal case back. So I bought that Reef watch. It's very hard to get a hold of, and it's a beautiful dive watch, and it can go down very deep. It's certified for a certain depth, but these Russian watches will go very deep. So here I'm screwing the mechanism back together and having a look at everything, making sure it all works. I got things ticking away, which is nice rather, and set the watch up. I'm trying to get it all set up to put the rotor back on. I was farting around with this because I had one of these little mini double wheels that are used to wind the watch, whether the rotor spins clockwise or counterclockwise. I had one of those in there. And that was causing me grief until I realized I put it in backwards. And once I put it in the right way, the darn watch worked perfectly. No problem at all. A little bit of oil, clean up the oil, put the rotor on. And when I put the rotor on, I used Rodico to spin it a bit, make sure the mechanisms were in fact winding, and they were winding perfectly. So there was no problem. Put a little bit of oil on the bearings for the rotor, spin it around, good to go. Martha, watch is done. Thank you very much for watching this really quick video. There you go. Set the time to eat.